Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or early evening, colleagues, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to today's webinar for the global launch of the Call to Action on Strengthening Water and Sanitation Regulatory Systems. We have a very exciting 75-minute session set up for you today, and we're very happy that you took the time out to join us. And as you can see on the screen, we'll have a number of luminaries in the water, sanitation, and hygiene sector joining us to provide very interesting perspectives, a commentary, observations about the call to action. So welcome again. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of housekeeping information as we get going. Firstly, this webinar will be recorded and made available on demand on the IWA Connect Plus platform and the IWA Network website with presentation slides and other information. The speakers are responsible for securing copyright permissions for any work that they will present of which they are not the legal copyright holder, and the opinions, hypotheses, conclusions, or recommendations contained in the presentations and other materials are the sole responsibility of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect IWA or WHO opinion. Next slide, please. Following up with a bit of additional information, you will note that today you will have the opportunity to use both the chat box and the question and answer box. For the chat box, please use this for general requests and for interactive activities. You will also find placed in the chat box from the organizers throughout the session various links to documentation that will be of interest to you. In the question and answer box, please use this to send questions to the panelists. We will answer these questions during the discussions. We have a liberal amount of time available for questions later on in the session, and we have a number of excellent panelists. So as you're going through and listening to their interventions, please do feel free to put your questions in the chat box, in the question and answer box, and then we'll refer those questions to the panelists during the Q&A section. Next slide, please. So now we would like to officially begin the global launch of the Call to Action on Strengthening Water and Sanitation Regulatory Systems. And for this, we're going to welcome in the moderator, Mr. Robert Bos. Robert Bos is a senior advisor for the International Water Association, and as many of you well know, has a long history in the sector, going back to the World Health Organization and other entities within the sector. So Robert, welcome to the webinar. We look forward to you taking us through. I do want to just remind colleagues that, of course, we are offering this in French and English as well. So please pick the language that you would like to hear. In your meeting or webinar controls, usually at the bottom of your screen in a black band with sort of a globe around it, you will see an interpretation icon. You can click on that, and that will be the language that you will then be hearing through the session. Again, this is an English and French session today. Optional to hear the interpreted language only, you can of course click mute original audio. Okay, next slide, please. And again, with that, we're very happy to commence with the formal part of our session today. And so I'm happy to welcome Robert Bos, Senior Advisor for the International Water Association, to be our moderator, as well as to present us with a scene setter behind the call to action and why we're all here today. Robert, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dave, and greetings to all from the Netherlands. I'm here because last week in the Netherlands we had the IWA Health-Related Water Micro conference for the whole week. And before I talk about the objectives, I just want to say that that was a very energizing event, not only in general, but particularly because in many of the presentations, which all were about, of course, drinking water quality, but also about the enabling environment and the issues that are at stake, like resilience and climate change and biodiversity, nature-based solutions, sanitation, all these presentations and the panel sessions that were held brought up regulation as a key issue that needs to be strengthened and pursued in order to achieve the targets that we've set ourselves. So that was very, very good, very inspiring. And of course, now we have this launch where we want to make sure that we work on the ideas that have come out of the discussions for this over the last sort of 1.5 years. to first of all, to create an enabling environment for regulation and regulatory frameworks and regulators, and improve the political space that regulators are working in, including, of course, policy, legal frameworks, and of course also the human rights. Then to address inequalities. We know that regulation covers, in many particular low and middle income countries, covers urban areas, but we would like to see it extend also to peri-urban and rural areas, and also to cover groups of people that are currently not properly covered by regulation. And then strengthen the implementation of the regulatory institutions, and also promote what has happened in some of the regions already around the world, regulators associations that promote the regional collaboration of the regulatory activities. Now, on the next slide, you'll see the timeline that was used for the. Can we go to the next slide, please? The timeline that was used for the preparation of this, and it started all in October 2023. Highlights of these were the various meetings at which the issues were discussed. So for certain, the various IWA congresses, the one in Kigali and also the one in Toronto in December 2023 and in August 2024, and the various in-between discussions and meetings, Zoom meetings that we had with the key partners and the core partners to come to the text that we are now launching today. So on the next slide again, just to say that the document is now available in a number of languages: English, Portuguese, Spanish, and French. And you can also access it through the website. And of course, if you scan the QR code that is now on the screen. So that is it for me, just as a first start. And then I would like to now invite the Executive Director of IWA, Dr. Kala Vairavamoorthy, to give you a no doubt inspiring opening statement.
Thank you very much, Robert. Can you hear me okay, Robert?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us from all over the world. It really is both a privilege and an honor for me to be here on behalf of the International Water Association, IWA, and to welcome you all to the global launch of the call to action on strengthening water and sanitation regulatory systems. IWA are very proud to co-host this milestone event with WHO, with UNICEF, and many of the other core and supporting partners who have really united behind this bold and very necessary initiative. This call to action arrives really at a defining moment. You know, the world is very much off track in achieving Sustainable Development Goal 6, and in too many places there is ineffective or absent regulation that is, being overlooked, and this really results in formidable obstacles to progress. Without strong regulatory systems, we can't guarantee safe drinking water, we can't ensure equitable access to sanitation, and we can't build the resilient services that our planet and our future generations so urgently need. So while regulation may be invisible, it is indispensable. It is the sort of quiet force that holds the water and sanitation sector together. When it functions well, its impacts are seamless. But when it fails, the effects are often sudden, visible, and devastating, and they often hit the most vulnerable the hardest. So this call to action speaks to both the mandates from above and from the voices below. From the top, we have national governments, international agencies, development banks who are increasingly recognizing that funding infrastructure is not enough. And without clear rules, oversight, and accountability, even the best investments can fail. From the bottom, we have utilities, communities, and civil societies who are demanding fair, inclusive, and transparent regulations. Regulations that protect the public, but also empower providers and sort of rebuilds trust in the public services that we have. So this is not about control. It's really about unlocking the potential for innovation, for equity, and for services that are sustainable, climate ready, and truly leave no one behind. Now, the journey to this call began more than a year ago, when a coalition of organizations, including IWA, WHO, UNICEF, ESAWAS, Adressa, LIS-Water, and others came together with a shared conviction. And that conviction was that regulation must rise on the global WASH agenda. Since that time, we've listened, we have learned, and we have convened voices from every level, from ministries to municipalities, from regulators to youth networks. And the result is not just the document that's being presented today, but it's a vision grounded in technical expertise and driven by political urgency. And so today we're not just launching a call for action, we're igniting a movement calling on countries, partners, and institutions to strengthen their regulatory foundations, to support champions who are already leading the way, and to elevate regulation as the cornerstone of resilient, inclusive water and sanitation systems. At IWA, we're very proud to stand alongside all of you in this journey through our vast network of utilities, regulators, and practitioners. We will continue to facilitate learning, build capacity, and help turn this call into concrete and lasting change. The time is to act now, and together we can make regulation not the silent engine of the sector, but the driving force of lasting transformation. So thank you all for everything you do, not only in advancing the WASH agenda, but also in ensuring that safe water and sanitation are no longer aspirations, but realities for all. Your work, your voices, and your vision are what will turn this call to action into real change for communities around the world. We are not just strengthening systems, we are really building a world where dignity, health, and resilience reach every household every day. So let's keep moving forward together. And again, thank you all. And with that, I will now hand back over to Robert. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you very much, Carla, for these very wise and inspiring words. We're now proceeding with the video that we've received from Her Excellency Retno Marsudi, UN Special Envoy on Water, and we're going to listen to her words of introduction.
Colleagues, distinguished participants, I congratulate the WHO and the International Water Association for the launching of the global call to action on strengthening water and sanitation regulatory systems. The global call provides crucial momentum to the global effort of ensuring water and sanitation for all. Despite progress today, more than 2 billion people still lack of access to safe drinking water. More than 3.5 billion still lack of access to safely managed sanitation. To meet our global commitment, we need to multiply efforts by 6 times for drinking water access and 5 times for safe sanitation for all. With only 5 years remaining to achieve 2030 agenda, the number of people affected by water and sanitation challenges continues to rise. In this situation, inaction is not an option. It is time to deliver concrete action and ensure water and sanitation for all. Strengthened water and sanitation regulatory systems are enabler of progress in water and sanitation sector. Effective regulation allows us to plan, ensure, and monitor action and resources required for meaningful impact. Regulation is not a barrier. It is a catalyst of progress. This is where the global call to action plays a significant role. First, it promotes a strong enabling environment for water and sanitation regulation. Beyond advocating for robust regulatory framework, it addresses the key challenges of regulation establishment and implementation, capacity building, and financing. In this regard, we must use the global call to action to intensify efforts and scale up support to strengthening water and sanitation regulation at regional, national, and local level. Second, it emphasizes the need of multi-stakeholders partnership. Water is essential to all. Hence, it is the responsibility of all. In the making of water and sanitation regulation, the involvement of all actors is imperative, from governments, private sectors, academia, civil societies, women, youth, and all. Without inclusive partnership, water and sanitation regulation will not be fit for purpose and will be left unimplemented. And last, the call underscores the importance of long-term viability. Regulation is not the end goal. The true objective is to ensure that regulation become instruments of progress. I commend the call on its focus to the continuation and sustainability of action, seeing water and sanitation as agendas of present and the future. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I congratulate WHO and the International Water Association for this timely initiative. I look forward to the successful implementation of the call, encouraged by the wide support it has already gained. I thank you very much.
Okay, so after these words by the Special Envoy, we're going a little bit more into the meat of the project, of the discussions. And so I would like to introduce the panelists that we have asked to join us. We have two of them for the moment. This is Noemi Plummier, who is the Strategic Partnership Facilitator for the World Youth Parliament for Water. She has a background in international environmental law, and she has worked also in a number of countries on the human rights to water and sanitation. And we have Yvonne Magawa, who is a regulator from Zambia. She has 18 years of experience in regulation, and she has been the driving force behind the ESAWAS, the regional association. This is the Eastern and Southern African Water and Sanitation Regulators Association. So I would like to start maybe with Noemi. Noemi, you know, you worked on human rights, and we know that law and human rights are the framework for regulation, and that regulation really sets those laws into motion. So can you tell us a little bit more about your experience in that and how you feel that the call to action will support both national laws to be applied more actively, but also how the human rights for water and sanitation are going to benefit from this call to action?
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, okay. I wasn't able to activate my camera. Just a quick one. There have been a slightly misunderstanding about my title. I used to be the Strategic Partnership Facilitator for the World Youth Parliament for Water, but now I'm working as a Thematic Policy Officer for the International Secretariat for Water, which is same family, no problem.
Okay.
And indeed, yes, in that capacity, then I'm providing some more guidance on the human rights for our networks, which are civil society and youth network. And in this capacity, we joined this call to action. So now I'm going to answer your question. It's a privilege to be here with you, and thank you very much for inviting me. So I would like to then contribute in this discussion by enhancing on insisting on the importance of following a human rights-based approach, and most specifically by representing again the voice of young people and civil society that play a critical role in advancing this common vision while we are here and meeting today. So why do we need to follow human rights-based approach? Because first and foremost, let's all remember that access to water, safe water and sanitation, it's a human right, among many other human rights that are related to water and sanitation. We have the right to dignity, we have the right to health. Of course, WHO is here with us, very important. We have the right for housing and food, the right to clean and healthy and sustainable environment, which is one of the newbie in the list. So a rights-based approach to regulation indeed is not just a legal necessity. I would say beyond that, it's also a moral imperative. And we all know that we are going through really difficult times respecting the basic rights in principle, especially in the space of the multilateralism. So why ensure that services of water and sanitation are not only technically adequate, but they also need to be equitable, inclusive, and accountable. And this embeds really into the core of the human rights to water and sanitation principle, which then allows which means that regulation needs to ensure availability, accessibility, acceptability, affordability, and safety for all, but particularly the most vulnerable ones. And you can read, this is in the general comment number 15 from 2002. Soon, 28th of July, we will celebrate the 25 years of the recognition of the human right to water and sanitation. So here we are together. But those obligations are for the states. The states have the obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill those rights. And therefore also all the actors that contribute to the water governance and safe management of water and sanitation. I don't know if I still have time to continue, or if you.
Well, maybe you can say a bit more about this in the next round, but
yes,
let's also move to Yvonne and listen to what she has to say, because as the executive secretary of the Regional Association of Regulators in her region, it may be nice to hear to what extent she feels that the call to action can help her and the association in the work with their members in the region, and whether she already has seen some impact from the efforts that have been made so far to get this call to action a reality. So Yvonne, can I move over to you?
Thank you, Robert. ESAWAS is a network of water supply and sanitation regulators, primarily created for the East and Southern African region, but now we are going continent-wide. So we do have members that are beyond the region, Nigeria, Sierra Leone. And our main focus has been actually to promote effective regulation and also to build the capacity of regulators to deliver on their mandates. So the call to action for us is long overdue with regards to strengthening regulation. As has been said by the previous speakers, regulation must be seen as a catalyst to improve service provision. And the three key things that need to be dealt with in the sector are strengthening sector governance, increasing the resource mobilization, and strengthening institutional capacities. Now, regulation is playing that anchoring role to address these aspects in the sector. So having a call to action that tries to bring on board governments, development partners, and all other sector actors to really look at issues that can improve service delivery. The role of the regulator cannot be left out. So the regulator has a critical role to play in mobilizing finance for the sector with regards to the mandates that it executes. It also has a role to play in building the capacity of institutions to execute mandates, and also to ensure the enabling environment is sound for the sector to make that progress. So in a nutshell, we're saying the call to action is beyond timely. It is really what is needed to ensure institutions, regulatory institutions, are well supported, well resourced, and put in a position that they can make the change that is needed for the sector.
Thank you very much, Yvonne, and thank you for highlighting the fact that regulation is about catalyst functions, it's not about being the policeman. And so that, you know, the role of regulators is quite a multitasking role to ensure that all the processes, the legal and implementation process around water and sanitation are done properly. And I wanted to ask Noemi, from that perspective, you know, when you set priorities in the legal context and also in the context of the human rights to water and sanitation, how do you see the issues related to accountability and enforcement, and how do you feel these may be strengthened by this call to action? Noemi.
Thank you for this this question. So I just talked in my intervention about the criteria, and alongside those criteria, there are procedural rules, and those procedural rules encompass different principles from the international law, from the human rights law, but also from the environmental law. And this is where we cover, for example, the accountability that you just mentioned. It's also about the non-discrimination, the principle of non-discrimination, sustainability, access to information, inclusivity, public participation, which is in our case with the International Secretariat for Water, all the potential that we recognize on being side by side with CSOs, with our coalition, which is the butterfly effect, and that's why we joined the call, but also catalyzing the Global Youth Movement for Water, the World Youth Parliament for Water, and its national chapters, which are young professionals. And so we provide them structured platform actually to meaningfully engage in water governance and management. And it goes with the principle of participation, access to information. In order to assess the compliance, we require monitoring data. And I'll just give one example. Why? Because if there is poor waste management, it affects directly the community, the most vulnerable, in terms of livelihood, public health, the ecosystem around them. And even we talked about the rights of the future generation, the next to come, you know. So for us, it's really important that there is effective frameworks, regulatory system that are again with the base, the human rights based approach. Yeah, so that was one example, but it's public participation. It's also required most of the time for in the environmental impact assessment prior to projects, you know. So we must, in some legislation, especially on countries that are part of the Aarhus Convention, we must consult all groups that are affected by any project, you know, and they are the primary users again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I would say that the importance of CSOs, of young people, it's being there not only as beneficiaries, but also as true actors, as decision maker. They can really bring the missing key to allow this equitability we were mentioning, and then this trust, this accountability. Often they act as watchdog, you know, like they are the one that are aware even before when there is any issue. So there is a need to be always in conversation, in dialogue with them, and to reach, as Dr. Vairavamoorthy, said, to leave no one behind. It is our goal to everyone. If we want prosperity, if we want peace, if we want a sustainable future for all, it goes through those efforts from the basin level all the way to the international level, and this is the importance of joining this call.
Okay, that's very clear, and I think the emphasis on participation, as it also comes out of human rights to water and sanitation, is a critical one. I wanted to ask Yvonne, how do you, you have your contact with your members, your growing number of members in Africa, and from that perspective, what is the feedback you get from them on the usefulness of the call to action, and also what opportunities and obstacles you see to the further development of regulation in your region?
Thank you, Robert. With regards, I'll start with the last one. With regards to development of regulation, you see, especially in East and Southern Africa, there's a lot of traction that is being created. The regulators are an accountability mechanism by themselves, picking up also from what Noemi was talking about. So the accountability through the regulator is in two directions. Pushing up to government, we say regulators are policy implementers, so they can check with government to what extent has government actually put in place the enabling environment to support improvements in the sector. And then the other direction is looking at the service providers themselves and holding them to account. For one, the quality of the services that they're offering, and on the other hand, ensuring that those same services are affordable to the consumers and driving universal access. That is very important for the regulators, leaving no one behind. So with advancing regulation, we have considered both urban and rural. A number of regulators have now onboarded the rural side, which was not there before, with a lot of concentration on urban previously. And also now we're not just looking at water supply and storage, we're also looking at non-sewer sanitation. So basically the regulators are now taking a holistic approach to addressing the sector in most countries. In a number of countries where they had ministerial regulators, they are now establishing independent regulators. So the call to action is really just cementing the work of the regulators and raising that visibility on what needs to be done for countries to move forward. As per the recently launched roadmap for advancing sanitation regulators, there are 6 steps which have been identified there to really advance regulation. It applies both for water supply and sanitation, but it basically gives a guidance on what needs to be put in place to strengthen regulation and to support the enabling environment. So using that also is assisting the regulators to pinpoint areas where they need strengthening, but we're also calling on governments, development partners to mobilize around strengthening the regulators in terms of the capacity of staff. We are dealing with that through our training center, where we're offering trainings in regulation, and that is also supporting the regulators and the service providers as well, to strengthen understanding of regulation and the requirements for regulation, the tools that are needed, and so on. So really saying this call to action is bringing together the right voices to be able to design regulation in a manner that is effective. And that is also the core purpose of ESAWAS. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. And I think at this stage, that is where I would leave it for this panel discussion. Thank you both, Noemi and Yvonne, for giving us some of the more salient details of how you're experiencing already the strengthening of regulation in your own context of work. Because this is underlining exactly what Kala was saying in the opening. It's not just a call to action, it's a mobilizing a movement that will, for the coming years, hopefully support the strengthening of regulatory frameworks. So thank you to both of you, Noemi and Yvonne. And we move on. We have another speaker in between who will provide us with his perspectives on the call to action. And that is Gustavo Saltiel, who used to be with the World Bank in Washington and now is a senior expert in the field of water and sanitation. And I would like to give the floor to you, Gustavo, to give us some of your thoughts on the whole issue.
Thank you, Robert. Good morning, distinguished colleagues. Thank you to the WHO and IWA for the invitation to participate in this call to action, a real honor. And today we stand at a pivotal moment in history. With 5 years, only 5 years remaining to achieve SDG 6, that is ensuring water and sanitation for all, we face an uncomfortable truth. We are not on track. I will first echo and not repeat what some of the previous speakers have said. First, regulation drives universal access. Second, regulation ensures financial sustainability. And third, regulation improves service quality and accountability. And let me be clear, regulation is not just bureaucratic red tape. It is the backbone of sustainable water and sanitation services. World Bank research across 40 countries shows that effective regulation serves as the critical bridge between policy intentions and service delivery. This has been confirmed by work done by many of the organizations represented in this call to action, and today, ADERASA, ESAWAS, IWA, LIS-Water, and others. But the focus of my intervention today will be on the crisis, and this is at the core of the call to action. First, we are not just facing a water crisis. We are confronting multiple interconnected crises that make effective governance absolutely essential. And I will briefly go through some of these crises. The first one, of course, is climate change, which is making water resources increasingly unpredictable. Regulation provides the framework for adaptive management, demand management, and resilient infrastructure planning. Without it, utilities cannot make the long-term investments needed for climate adaptation. The second one, of course, is rapid urbanization and the pressure it puts on the utilities to continuously expanding the services to new areas. Without regulation, there is no framework, and there is no rationale for utilities addressing the needs of the new people coming to cities. Third, and this is sometimes not duly taken into account, fiscal and financial constraints. In the current multiple crises, in many countries, it means that public resources alone cannot finance universal access. Regulation is the key to unlocking private and blended finance by providing the certainty and risk mitigation that investors require. Fourth, political instability and fragility make regulation even more crucial. In conflict-affected states, like for instance Yemen, to mention one, even limited regulatory oversight of informal service providers helps maintain basic services and prevent health crises. This call to action represents our collective commitment to prioritize regulatory development as a cornerstone of the SDG 6 strategy. We must move beyond seeing regulation as a nice-to-have technical detail and recognize that it has the fundamental infrastructure that makes everything else possible. The choice before us is stark. Either continue with business as usual and watch SDG 6 slip further from our grasp, or embrace regulation as the game changer that can transform our sector's performance. The multiple crises we face are not obstacles to progress. They are urgent reminders that we cannot afford weak governance and ineffective service delivery. The time for action is now. The tool we need is regulation, and the goal we can achieve is water and sanitation for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gustavo, for these important points that you raise and looking at the sustainability of both the regulatory frameworks and their implementation. I was particularly struck by the fact that you also mentioned the need to bring in informal service delivery into the picture. And I remembered the work that was done in Kenya with Robert Kagubia, using the human rights to water and sanitation as an instrument to achieve regulation of informal service delivery. So very important issue. So now I think we move on to the next panel. And we want to bring in, as you've seen at the start, and Carla mentioned, there were some key driving agencies behind establishing and creating this call to action. But there were also many core partners who contributed and who we consulted at several occasions to make sure that we got things right in this text that we're presenting today. So we have two of them here today. One is a regulator from Palestine, Mohammad Hmaidi, who is been working under, as you will realize, difficult circumstances, who has been very much contributing his experience and his knowledge to this call to action. And the other is Dhot, who is the head of the AquaFed, the Association of private water and sanitation providers. And the two of them will again talk about the issues that come up from their perspective when we talk about the implementation of this call to action. So welcome both of you. And maybe I can start with Mohammad and ask you, in your experience providing regulation under difficult circumstances, what are the regulatory tools that have worked well under those circumstances? And, what are the gaps from the sort of very rather extreme situation that you're working under? And how can that knowledge help to have other regulators in other countries where similar, let's say, difficult circumstances exist? How can that help them to promote the regulatory framework?
Well, thank you, Robert. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I'm really honored to be part of this call and honored to be part of being engaged from day one. To respond to your question, from the day that the call was an idea, we have taken a number of measures in Palestine to maximize the benefit of the call and the added value. From day one, we have taken a number of, we thought as prerequisites in terms of we have made all our data as public and available through a platform, so any member of society can have access to add transparency to our work and to his service providers' work. At the same time, we have started engaging universities in terms of researchers, staff in data collection, data analysis, and research. At the third time, we have engaged civil society groups and local groups in the understanding of the relation between water scarcity, health, food scarcity, and climate change. At the same time, we have increased the reporting periodicity. We have maximized the reporting to the Prime Minister as well as to the Prime Minister, to the Water Minister. Now, how can the call help us? I'm talking about two levels: the local level in Palestine and the Arab region level. I'm really honored to say that in the last Aqua meeting, the Arab water. The Arab Water Utilities Association board has taken a decision to proceed with establishment of the Arab Water Regulator Association. And this is now an agenda item on the next Arab water ministers coming soon. This call and all material will be part of their agenda through the Palestine water minister. So, which means that this has, I'm sure, added value for unifying the regulatory tools within the Arab region. Now, to make sure that we do not miss anyone aside, we have engaged international associations. So we cannot say that this is only for the Arabs, but for the region. It's true that members will be Arab countries, but the added value will be for the region, and that we have engaged them on the basis that the water scarcity is a regional and not a local issue in the Middle East. Now, in terms of Palestine, knowing that there are various types of service providers, being public, being private, being NGOs, and to regulate all of those under one umbrella may not be easy unless the government has a say. So that's where the call will help us bringing all of these together with the support of the government and the different related ministers. At the same time, being so with different types, that might leave some way to escape from providing the necessary infrastructure, at least at the public level. But being all regulated under one umbrella might bring that at all in the right track. Being independent regulator, again, might give the government a way to escape from ensuring the financial sustainability of the regulator. But with this call, with their engagement, we believe that we are on the same track, we are on the same path, and with the same goal. So that's why I'm talking about the added value of the call itself, what we have prepared, and the impact of this call on the region, not only Arab countries, but the region as a whole. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much. Very good insights on how the call to action can actually be taken up by regulators and used to the benefit of strengthening every aspect of that. I wanted to ask Neil, of course, utilities and providers have as their main goal to deliver safe and clean drinking water to people and dignified sanitation. But then, of course, there may still be different perspectives for public sector and private providers. So I would like to know from you, from the private provider perspective, how do you see the role of this call to action, and what benefits will you see coming from that in your particular context?
Thanks, Robert, and hello, good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone. Thanks for the invitation today. Robert, I don't think private and public organisations have a different perspective on regulation at all. Certainly not from my members. We want exactly the same thing. I think that's a real myth that the private sector have a different aspect. There's different points in which are important to us, but ultimately the goals are absolutely the same. So let me be clear on that. On the call to action, it's been great because it's really driven quite a big chunk of our work in the last few months and going forward. So what we've done in the last few months is produced hopefully simple to use regulation maps of how different countries are regulating private water operators. And so it's not a kind of 200-page PDF, it's a kind of set of about 25 slides that map clearly and easily for people, I hope, the different systems in place, which the different ministries are, what the different regulators are, their roles and responsibilities. So, and I'll put a link to those in the chat straight after I've finished. And going forward, again, the call to action has driven us to then think about what we can usefully do with help regulators. And what we're going to do is set up a much more of a kind of interface specifically on innovation and technology and how regulators can make sure that they feel kind of appropriately in control and they're up with the curve with the private sector. I think that's really, really important. And this came out so much in the discussion about the UN conference in March, which was in New York. A lot of the permanent missions were talking about regulation of innovation. They obviously mentioned AI and there's kind of a bit, not a fear, but a kind of anxiety about it. But just generally in a much more positive sense, it was like, how can regulators really proactively incentivize innovation, because that's what's needed. So it's not a new concept, but that's something that's really driving us forward. Just quickly, in terms of our findings, and with particularly these maps so far, we've found that roles and responsibilities in terms of countries that have private sector quite prominent, the roles and responsibilities of the ministries and the regulators are clear, right? That's not a problem, and it's set in law, and that's what good systems look like. The lack of where the problems happen is when the regulatory philosophies isn't so clear, right? So where there's not alignment in a clear alignment between all the different regulators and not trying to always achieve the same thing, or it's not been codified, and also where there's not a clear national policy or national strategy as well. We've found that when there's a national water plan, a meaningful plan, it makes a huge difference. And that's the kind of thing that attracts not only donor aid, which is, we know is reducing a little bit, but much needed private capital as well. Having a strategy in place really, really helps. But we've seen that even independent regulators sometimes are not ultimately independent. They are set up to be independent, but life takes over. And we see even in England, the problems that we've seen with Ofwat, but I feel, and I had some skin in the game on this, was that the regulator was too busy trying to fulfill a political objective, which was to artificially keep the tariffs low. And now what's happened is that's led to lack of investment, and now the problems that we're seeing, particularly on our beaches in England. So I think that's a really important point. I'll be very, very quickly. Just another thing that we noticed in this work so far on the call to action is that a lot of people talk about regulatory data, but I think we've got to be really clear about data for who, right? And metrics and performance monitoring. There's different constituencies here. And I think Carla was alluding to this earlier. There's data about performance monitoring. There's data that's necessary to allow innovators and startups to plug and play their systems or their tech into the system. So they need things like data points and monitoring points. They need to know all these things. They're not always clear. Investors also have different sets of needs, which are sort of a little bit more around performance issues, but also the public as well. I've seen in some countries, like again, in where I'm sitting now in England, there's so much information available for the public, but the public aren't actually interested so much. You can over-engineer this too much. What they want is like, does the water work? Is it drinkable? And are you basically not polluting my beach or my river? That's the one to know. It's as simple as that, right? So anyway, going forward now, just to conclude, the call to action for us is going to continue to drive our work. We are now trying to use this information to help governments understand public-private partnerships better. So if they want to do it, they can use these maps, and they'll be using other information that we'll be providing. And it's the same for regulators as well. So sorry, I was a bit long there, but I hope that gives some idea of what we've been doing.
No, that was excellent, Neil, because it brought up various issues that maybe people now with the question and answer may want to get into more and relate to. But before we go on to that, I just want, as a very quick thing, both to you and Mohammad, maybe first, Mohammad, you mentioned water scarcity as a major sort of issue that plays in your region. And last week in this meeting we had here, we talked a lot about resilience, and the issue came out that it's not, we tend to focus on climate resilience, but there are many issues that relate to resilience resulting to or reacting to other points that need to be raised. And so I wanted to ask you, do you feel that resilience comes out sufficiently in this call to action? And can you actually use the call to action to bring resilience, which is often a longer term issue too longer term for politicians? Does that come out well in the call to action, and can you use it to promote resilience issues in your regulatory work?
Well, look, given the ongoing conflict in the region, and the long list of priorities now, and water access is a real issue now. Water scarcity is not scarce anymore. It's not there, at least in Gaza and part of the West Bank, and even part of the Arab region. That's why even with the impact on the ability of people to access, ability to pay for water services. So resilience is now have a much wider definition, at least in this region. What we have made in terms of data collection now is we had to come up with different tools, different collection tools, segment the country in different segments, different areas where we can group each in one category. But at the same time, as I've said earlier, we have started engaging civil societies, at least with us in universities, to outline what are the mitigation measures and how to be resilient in terms of not only security, but also water scarcity, food scarcity. So the engagement of civil society, researchers, students, that has an impact. and having the international donors and partners being part of the whole team, that again has made lots of impact. So it is the international donors, local associations, civil societies, NGOs, volunteers, all are joining forces at least to help the communities to be really able to come up with at least solutions that keep them alive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Neil, from your perspective, do you feel that the profile of resilience in this call to action is sufficient? It gives you an instrument by which you can then promote the relevant points in your community?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%, Robert. I do, and it's actually, I feel it's actually enabled us a little bit to be a little bit more bolder on things. So, for example, what I'd like to be getting into, it's part of our plan in the next few years. I'm hoping people like Yvonne and others will from ESAWAS will work with us on this, is to think about how regulators, again, I mentioned about innovation, because without that, we're not going to be as resilient as we need to be. So how regulators can incentivize innovators even further, but also looking at things like sector skills, right? Because again, if we don't have the workforce to do all these things that we need to do, then we might as well give up now, right? So, and that's something, there's a few issues like that, for example, how we'd like to work with regulators more in the next couple of years about how we can encourage utilities and other service providers to overall make improvements in their skills, particularly bringing on the young people and the young stars of the future. And I think that's actually a regulatory issue. Well, we think that, and we're going to try and drive that forward. So yes, short answer, Robert, it's definitely about resilience, and this has really given us a really massive push and drive. So thanks again to the IWA, WHO, and others for doing this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Neil and Mohammad, for your valuable contributions. It's been really good to get those perspectives also out and further encourage people to take up their active role in promoting the call to action. And so now from here on, we move to the question and answer. And I know that Isabella has been writing on the chat to see whether she can evoke people to actually put some questions and answer. Isabella, can you help me and let me know what sort of questions we have collected at this point?
Yes, Robert, I can. So we have one saying like, however, are we preaching to the converted? Are we talking about only with top-level support for regulation? What initiatives are being implemented to ensure political figures have an increased understanding of the importance of regulation, and what steps are required to meaningfully strengthen regulation?
Oh, that's a whole series of questions. Maybe I can first go to Yvonne to address some of these issues that Isabella just raised, because they seem to be at the heart of what you're doing with the association and with your own work as regulator. Yvonne?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. We are doing quite a lot. And as I said, we have established a training center for capacitating sector actors in regulation. So not just the regulators, but beyond the regulators. Also, in addition to that, and I'm happy to take up that opportunity, Neil, hearing from you and what we can do with increasing capacities. And also, in addition to that, we are also very strong on developing regulatory frameworks, regulatory tools that are taken up by several countries. And that is also helping to accelerate the ability of the regulators to deliver effective regulation. So I don't know if I missed something, Isabella, in what you on that question, but that is what we're doing.
I think that you covered everything, Yvonne. Robert, you're muted.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. And I was looking at the questions and answers. I also feel, and there is a question particularly about sanitation. As we know, sanitation is always the stepchild in the discussion on water and sanitation. So I'd like to ask some of the panelists maybe to say something about whether they feel the call to action addresses the regulation of sanitation in a sufficient manner so that there can be a bit of a catch-up for sanitation in that connection. Maybe I can ask Mohammad first, because he's close to what's happening, and sanitation is an important issue in your region. Is sanitation regulation, does the call to action offer an opportunity for gradual strengthening, particularly of sanitation regulation?
Well, thank you. Just let me add one statement what Yvonne has said. In our case, we have prepared an incentive program for service providers, and that's implemented now. At the same time, we have made a joint force committee between Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Local Government, Water Authority, and the regulator to address and support the service providers and meet their expectations, includes capacity gaps. Now, in terms of sanitation, yes, we have taken that seriously, and we handle sanitation completely as water. The only gap is reuse. That's not very much yet addressed in the way that we like, but the number of variables and indicators that we have taken for sanitation is almost the same as water, as I've said. But in terms of reuse, we are still working on that, and we are looking for those countries who have really proceeded and made experience in regulating reuse, if we can join forces or learn from them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last week here in the Netherlands at this meeting, we had a discussion on the update of the WHO guidelines on the safe use of wastewater in agriculture and aquaculture. The old ones from 2006 make it a very complicated story, and I think also complicated for regulators to work with. So there will be a new version being developed very soon and hopefully available, taking into account what the needs are of regulators to work in that area. There's also a question here about the positioning of service recipients. This comes from Bangladesh. The position of service recipients in the overall development of regulatory frameworks. Are we listening to them enough? How can we make the regulation development process more demand-driven? And maybe that's a question I would like to pose to Neil to see what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, that's a really difficult question to answer. Thanks, Robert. No, I'm joking. I think in some places, again, okay, we'll look at some systems, again, where I sit in UK, and I think this is the same for most of Europe, is that the public definitely have a voice, and they definitely are included and they're involved, and there's all sorts of systems in place. For in England, they're asked about willingness to pay, for example, before plans are set between the private operators in that case. So there are some places where it works clearly, but I'm still not convinced that we really truly understand exactly what it is that, and the points where people want to be involved, quite honestly. And then it can happen also, I put the responsibility on the public a bit more anywhere in the world, because they're quite passive on water issues unless there's a problem, right? And suddenly it's like, whoa, what the hell's going on here? Yeah. So I think that it works both ways. But I've seen in other countries and other systems around the world where public clearly and the users have absolutely no say whatsoever. That the human right to water and sanitation is not enshrined in law. And even when it is enshrined in law, there are no actual mechanisms to then put that in place, right? So with all the will and the shiny tags in the world, like, you know, a human rights kind of enabling legislation, it's really implementing what matters. I think sometimes an example of good practice, Robert, just to finish, is in some countries we have seen, not just in England, but there's kind of like a user council for water, for example, or users have a voice, an official voice into the system that's set again through regulation or law. It's something, it can help, right? It's not the be all and end all, but it can help.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Of course, we listen to this about regulation and focus on drinking water quality and service delivery quality. But there's also the fact that the community of regulators is quite a diverse one. We're not only talking about water and sanitation regulators, we also have environmental, economic, and a host of other regulators. And I wanted to ask Noemi, from your background,
mystery question, I guess, or is it just me? I didn't hear.
You have to guess the question now.
Okay, because I was like, okay, I'll wait.
Noemi, I think that we had some issues with his connection. Let me see if I can locate Robert. Just a second.
I couldn't guess. I'm sorry. I just heard something about environmental, but then it's super broad.
yeah, no, I'm talking about the fact that
He's back.
are you getting me now?
Yes, you're back.
Yeah. Okay, good. So the issue is that it's observed that there is quite a heterogeneity in the community of regulators. Also, it's not all drinking water quality regulators. And so there are environmental, economic, and other regulators. And so from your perspective, since you've worked in environmental law, how do you see the opportunities for the other regulators?
Oh my God, that's a curse. Robert. I guess it's about collaboration in between different regulators and different sectors on making sure that, I mean, I would try to guess this question. Again, like the beauty of the human rights-based approach, and as Neil said, they are all embedded, and that's what I try to present on cross-cutting principles and then overlapping or intertwine recognition of the human rights. And then they are all going towards anyway the most vulnerable and then the marginalized groups, as we call them, to make sure that we leave no one behind. And by focusing on those groups, then we have an emphasis on a broader spectrum of the population and therefore the users. So to answer your question, I mean, I think what is needed is also more cross-sectoral collaboration. We've been saying that I'm one of the youngest here in the call, and since I've been around in youth activism, I've been hearing all of you saying that we need to bridge the sectors, we need to break the silos, and we know SDG 6, it's at the core of all the other SDGs. We know human right to water and sanitation is intertwined with all the prior human rights recognized, but also the newest one, healthy, clean, and sustainable environment. So I think there is need for more dialogue in between the different regulators, but also that more dialogue in between the technicians, as Neil answered in the chat to someone called Yvonne. And in between the lawyer, the regulators, you know, the people in the parliament assembly, also talking to your politician, the one drafting the laws, you know, and the regulation. This is also very important. And young people also, we see their role as not being shy, because they represent 2.4 of the parliamentarians, so which is nothing, to go into politics, to make the laws change, but also to advocate to the politician, and this dialogue as themselves being young professional, to then talk about how we can better advocate for better regulation, which have the human rights, water and sanitation at the heart. But that being said, it is really difficult, and it starts to also with a lot of raising awareness on other regulators, other groups, that water is at the heart of everything. And this is really a key goal and vision of the International Secretariat for Water, to contribute to this informal dialogue, but also formal dialogue, on always having the water lens, you know. Yes, you are doing wonderful, but bring this perspective. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Okay, Thank you very much. That's very useful to have that perspective. And with that, I think we've come to the end of the Q&A because we have to move on to the next item. And one of the last questions I saw on the Q&A was, where do we take things from here? So I want to thank again the 4 panelists for their responses to these Q&A questions, and then move on to the next agenda item, which is the roadmap, and where we'll then hear indeed where we go from here now that the call to action has been launched. So I think I hand over, is it to Bruce?
It's over to me at this moment, Robert, David from WHO, but I just wanted to say a huge virtual applause for you for such a heavy load of moderating and facilitating really wonderful questions with our excellent and dynamic panelists. So much good information. And for those of you who have posted questions, Robert did get some of them to the panelists, and we will respond to them with a document following this webinar. But again, a huge round of thanks to Robert for leading us through with these really wonderful panelists. So what I'll be presenting here just before we go to the closing moment with Bruce Gordon from WHO is a little bit about the roadmap for advancing sanitation regulation. Sanitation was discussed a little bit in the last session, but the reason we wanted to mention this roadmap is because it's new and it can exemplify how under the call to action as an umbrella for advocacy and communication, we can sort of take the call to action forward. So the roadmap for advancing sanitation was developed by WHO with support from UNICEF, ESAWAS, and WSUP, Water and Sanitation for Urban Populations, and it was launched a little bit earlier this month. Now, it was developed in order to respond to a key highlight from the GLASS data in the last GLASS cycle, and that is that regulation for sanitation, especially for on-site systems, is really lagging behind. And in fact, GLASS also notes that where there are strong regulatory systems and strong regulation, progress against WASH targets is much quicker. GLASS, of course, is the WHO-hosted UN Water Initiative to monitor the enabling environment for SDG 6, specifically targets 6.A and 6.B. On the means of implementation. So the roadmap is designed to help countries move from having little or no regulation to functioning, high-performing systems. And it has a lot of very good real-world examples from Africa, Asia, Europe, and Latin America, sourced from hundreds of our colleagues from around the world. So it is really state-of-the-art. So it's a practical tool that, again, can be used kind of under the umbrella of the call to action as an advocacy instrument. Particularly the call to action's encouragement to develop context-specific national regulatory roadmaps and to build shared understanding across sectors. So next slide, please. So what you see here is the key framework to the call to action. It's structured, to the roadmap. It's structured around 6 core steps that are critical to strengthening sanitation regulation. And if you go from left to right, numbers 1 through 6, you'll see that these range from legal review and institutional frameworks to accountability mechanisms, data systems, capacity building, and adapting to emerging challenges like climate change. In the roadmap, each step is supported by practical examples and guiding principles, and countries are encouraged to use the roadmap in a flexible, context-specific way. In fact, even though these steps are 1 through 6, it may be that in a given country, step 4 is where to really start, or in another country, it could be step 2, and it's an iterative process. So it's not a checklist, but it's a strategic guide that can be adapted to each country's starting point. Next slide, please. So how does this connect again further with the call to action? Well, the call to action asks us to move from commitment to implementation, and the roadmap is an example of one of the tools that can help us do that. Many of the organizations involved in developing the call to action and also in this call tonight also have their own tools. Countries can use the roadmap to build or refine their own national regulatory plans for sanitation, just as the call asks for measurable, context-appropriate roadmaps. By sharing case studies and using peer learning platforms, you can also contribute to collective progress. WHO hosts one such platform, RegNet, and IWA and others do as well. And most importantly, the roadmap helps us link regulation with broader goals, such as equity, climate resilience, health, topics touched on today, but also which are central to both the roadmap and to the call. So you see the URL and the QR code for the call to action, and we hope you will find it useful on its own and in the context of the call to action. So with that, we'll turn over to our final speaker to close out the session for us today. I'm very pleased to introduce Mr. Bruce Gordon, who is the unit head for the Water, Sanitation, Hygiene, and Health Unit at the World Health Organization. Bruce, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave, and thanks everyone. I just wanted to leave the audience with three thoughts, and the first I think is quite a simple one, and that is, it's an amazing consensus that I think we all see here. So everyone, and there was a comment about preaching to the converted. I guess everyone is converted on this call, and I'll get into what we do next. But this issue that regulation is a cost-effective mechanism that helps investors, it helps service providers, it helps advocates of human rights, it helps those that care about the environment. There is an incredible consensus from a diverse group of stakeholders, and we've heard that. So that's the first point, and a simple one, but I couldn't help but notice that that we have many issues in the wash sector and the health sector that people are disputing, and what's the best way to go about business, but this one certainly is not. And in fact, that's why I think there was about 40 plus organizations involved in this call to action. It was actually quite easy to get people to come together because people were already doing things in terms of their own institutions. But the second point is, you know, why are we doing this all? Why are we having a call to action? And the answer is very simple. We're trying to bring this message, especially to governments, to ensure that there is an investment in that enabling environment that allows regulators to function properly. So it's about extending services to areas that aren't being regulated properly, and it's about improving the quality of regulation. And regulators themselves have certain constraints in terms of funding and in terms of capacity that I think are being solved by many, but unless we get governments involved and attentive, then those sort of overarching legislative actions and policy actions at a higher level, you know, those are the ones that we need to see. People have talked about that. So what's next? You know, is this, we offer this call to action. I think someone in the comments had mentioned, is it the end of the line and then over to everyone else? And to some extent, I think it is over to everyone else in the sense that if we look at the major actors here today, whether it's IWA, whether it's UNICEF and their WASP, REG, whether it's LIS-Water, whether it's the regional regulatory associations like ESAWAS, there is like a profound amount of attention already being kind of taken through everyone's own constituency groups. And so if you have a development bank that's very taken by this, and we talked to many of them, and they may be on the call, you know, we're going to see increased political interest. And when we look at the conferences coming up, particularly the UN Water Conference in 2026 and its preparatory process, you know, that is a member state process. And so we will be seeking ways to ensure that member states who are already interested in improving regulation will take that up in that debate. There's members on, there's many international events that are happening, and the idea is mainstreaming regulation, which is already happening with all of them. So having said that, I don't think it's a matter of stopping a kind of, let's say, a global structured, you know, kind of guidance toward this in support of this call to action. That will continue. But unless all of us are able to kind of promote it through our own constituency groups and our networks, then, you know, we're not going to reach the governments and the politicians that are our primary audience. So we're relying on you, we're relying on ourselves. But I wanted to then move to thank everyone, because you will hear more from us as we move forward in the year. But I would like to thank all the panelists. First of all, it was very interesting listening to your insights and hearing the consensus and specific views. Robert, thanks for the moderation. Dave, others in the prep process. And really, most of all, and I'm not going to go through the list, but just thanks to the 40 plus organizations that we've talked to that were really supportive of this call to action. And I think that everyone among those 40 were very much cognizant that unless this is mainstreamed among all of us, it's not going to go anywhere. And as Gustavo, maybe I'll end with his words, and I think some others have said it, we are at a pivotal moment. And the pivotal moment is that this is essential to act now, not just for the SDGs, because that's an international goal, but because that we have an achievable process here. And I think for me, that's the most important. I mean, so let us achieve this together. And thank you very much, everyone. And we look forward to being in touch. So back to you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you to all of our participants today. But mostly, thank you to all of the colleagues who attended from different parts of the world. So please do feel free to download the call to action in one of 6 languages, and please do share it within your own networks. And let's keep the conversation going. Wish everybody a great day, and look forward to keeping in touch. We will now close the webinar. Thank you.